Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's ITA Clean Sport Education webinar on the Milano Cortina 2026 anti-doping programme. My name is Mary Irvin, and I am a member of the education team at the International Testing Agency. Now, before we go any further, I want to make sure that everyone is aware of the simultaneous translation options we have available today. On the Zoom menu, there is a button called Interpretation. We deliver this session in English, but we have simultaneous translation options in Arabic, French, Russian, and Spanish. And all of these languages are also being recorded. You can also use automated translated captions. Select a supported language from the captions box on your Zoom menu. Please note that these captions are translations of the original English voice, and in the case of any discrepancies, the meaning and spirit of the original English will prevail. Now, joining me today are my colleagues from the International Testing Agency, Matteo Vallini, Head of International Federations and Major Events, and Damien Clivaz, ITA Managing Senior Legal Counsel. First up, welcome to you, Matteo.
Hi everyone.
And welcome to you as well, Damien.
Hi, Mary. Hi, everyone.
Great. We'll be hearing from both of them very soon. A little bit more housekeeping from me first, though. To get the most out of today's webinar, we are using the polls, and a reminder that your answers are anonymous. We'll also be addressing some of the questions that you submitted in advance via your registrations, and we'll answer some additional questions live at the end. As a reminder, you can write them at any time in the session using the Q&A button on your Zoom menu, and the earlier, the better. So, on to today's topic, and that is, of course, the upcoming Milano Cortina Games. We're going to cover a lot of information very specific to these games. But first up, I'd like to take a moment to give a very brief overview of the organisation I work for, the ITA. So for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, the ITA is an independent organisation that offers anti-doping services to international federations and major event organisers. Our mission is to work towards a level playing field for athletes by consistently delivering high-quality anti-doping programs through a collaborative, professional, and innovating approach. And the ITA has been delegated the anti-doping program for Milano Cortina by the International Olympic Committee. Now, of course, anti-doping programs are very comprehensive, and they are comprehensive, of course, for major events also. So I'm delighted to welcome Matteo to the webinar, who's going to talk to this slide in just a moment. Matteo, perhaps you can tell us about some of the key activities that our audience can see on the screen here.
Thank you, Mary, and good day, everyone, wherever you're located in the world. Again, it's always a great pleasure to meet all of you, to run you through the specificities of the Olympic Games anti-doping work. And yeah, I would like to start by saying that anti-doping at the Olympic Games is not only about testing. Of course, testing represents a big portion of the work that we implement at the Games, but there are many other areas that are covered in terms of delivering a comprehensive anti-doping program. So, first of all, it's important to note that although the ITA has been delegated by the IOC with the responsibility of planning and delivering a comprehensive risk-based testing program to protect the integrity of the Games, the IOC, as a signatory to the World Anti-Doping Code, remains responsible from a WADA code compliance standpoint for all aspects of the doping control conducted by the ITA or other third parties delegated to operate at the Olympic Games on IOC's behalf. So from an anti-doping standpoint, the IOC acts as the testing authority and the results management authority at the Olympic Games. Now, the specific services provided by the ITA for the Olympic Games can be summarized into the following ones. So, first of all, we collaborate very closely with the Milano Cortina Organizing Committee and the local NADO Italia, in this specific case, for the implementation of the anti-doping program and to ensure that all standards and requirements are met. We develop a risk assessment, which consists in the collection and analysis of data to classify and determine the exposure of doping the level of exposure of doping of the different populations of athletes participating to the game. So this is based on a broad number of parameters actually, and takes into account the physiological aspects of each discipline and sport, historical data such as adverse analytical findings, anti-doping rules violations by sport and country, testing histories, and so on and so forth. The risk assessment is then translated into a test distribution plan, which identifies when and where athletes will be tested. So this is the test distribution plan produced at this point is really a starting point, right? It sets the foundation of the testing program. But this is not set in stone in the sense that it has to leave a certain degree of flexibility to incorporate any changes received via other sources of information, such as, for example, the pre-games testing outcomes that we'll talk about later on, athlete biological passport recommendations, confidential reporting information received via Reveal, international federations, and other anti-doping organizations information shared prior to or during the games. We also administer therapeutic use exemptions via an independent therapeutic use exemption committee composed by physicians crossing over a large range of medical specialties. We are responsible for results management activities and the prosecution of cases before the CAS ad hoc division, which, as you may know, acts as the first instance tribunal for anti-doping rule violations at the games and imposes disciplinary consequences. And we're lucky enough today to have my colleague Damien Clivaz here, who can tell us all about it later on. We also assist in the education and training of sample collection personnel in accordance to the ITA doping control manual, with the support of all the training tools, online training tools that the ITA has developed specifically for the Olympic Games, and we carefully select. In collaboration with the Milano Cortina 2026 Organizing Committee, the NADO, the recruitment of sample collection personnel that will be operating at the Games. And finally, we also manage the athlete biological passport program during the Games. We manage the long-term storage and reanalysis program, and we will provide you with more details on this specific topic later on. And again, like it is the case today with this webinar, we also provide education services, seminars, webinars to the sport community in general, which is involved with the Winter Games of Milano Cortina.
Thanks so much, Matteo. Look forward to hearing more from you in just a few moments' time. But first up, I would like to ask the audience a couple of questions now that we have introduced ourselves and our organisation. We'd like to know a little bit about you. So the first poll question of today is already up on your screens. And that is, what is your role? Could you please let us know, are you an athlete, coach, medical personnel, administrator, educator, or perhaps you have a different role, and if so, you may want to mention that in the chat as well. I'll give you another few seconds just to cast your answer there. In the interim, though, thank you so much for already saying hi to us in the chat, even before this poll was launched. I won't be able to give a shout out to everyone, but I can see that we have a lot of different countries represented. Canada, Japan, Kazakhstan, Brazil, Sierra Leone, Cambodia, Pakistan, Hungary, Mexico, Germany, just a few there to mention. Okay, so thanks very much for voting there. I can see that we have a good spread of roles there. We're looking at 21% athletes, 17% coaches, 21% medical personnel, 17% administrators. So the top four there all are very close in numbers. Quite a lot of fellow educators as well. Welcome to you as well. Our second question of the day is then, we'd just like to know a little bit more about your experience of the Olympic Games. So, will Milano Cortina be your first Olympic Games experience? Have you been to an Olympic Games before? Or will you be supporting and cheering your athletes from home? So again, I will just pause while those votes are coming in. So again, I can see things are fairly close here as well. For 40% of you, you have been to an Olympic Games before, but for 28% of you, this will be your first Olympic experience. And we have 32% of you supporting and cheering from home. Okay, so now we have a feel for those of us who are with us today. I would like to pause and formally take the opportunity to say congratulations to you going to the Games, whether this is your first Olympic Games, whether you have participated in several previously, it is a massive achievement. And of course, if you are supporting and cheering from home, thank you very much for your role in your athlete's journey. And considering the role and the journey of the athlete, we're going to start off today by looking at the pre-Games programme and what we have done in anti-doping to protect the integrity of the upcoming Games. First up, Matteo mentioned it earlier, but a key principle in anti-doping is that an athlete's first experience with anti-doping should be through education rather than doping control. It's important that athletes know that they have a right, as highlighted in the Athlete Anti-Doping Rights Act, to education. And what does education mean in advance of a major games like the Olympic Games? Well, to me, it's making sure that athletes know their rights and their responsibilities and how to fulfill them. Simply because this means that when you are at the Games, you can do what you are there to do and you're able to focus on competing to the best of your ability without any doubts, concerns, or worries. Ideally, you as athletes and athlete support personnel should be educated at home in advance of a major event. If you are an athlete or athlete support personnel and your National Olympic Committee or your NADO is offering you the opportunity to protect yourself and your integrity through education, then we really encourage you to engage with this. The ITA has provided support for this approach through a National Olympic Committee Clean Sport Education Guide for Milano Cortina and a toolkit of education resources for any anti-doping organisation to use to support these education efforts. These are linked in the resources slide at the end of the webinar, and we will be sharing the slides with everyone. Or, of course, please feel free to scan the QR code now to download this resource. I'd also like to take the opportunity to highlight a few more education resources. Up next is the WADA Adele for Milano Cortina 2026 Olympics course. Either as administrators to please promote this to athletes and other team members going to the Games, or for athletes and their support personnel to take the initiative and complete the course on their own. Now, this e-learning is designed specifically for these upcoming Games. It's free, it doesn't take too long to complete, and it's available in the languages listed on the screen here. I think it's also timely to mention that there is also a parallel course for the Paralympic Games, and it is available in the languages on your screen now too. Okay, now that we have addressed education, let's bring Matteo back into the discussion here as well. Matteo, can you tell us about the pre-games testing initiatives that are in place? As you can see on the screen here, the program is already well underway, even though the games haven't begun. So, Matteo, how do you decide who to test and who does this testing?
Thank you, Mary, again for this question. I have briefly introduced the risk assessment and test distribution plan exercise earlier on. Again, I mentioned this has to be flexible enough to incorporate input generated from coming through via different sources. But let's delve more into the detail of these works. So more specifically, in the lead up to the games, the ITA is responsible for the implementation of a pre-games project, right? So this consists in a review of testing patterns across anti-doping organizations worldwide. So this is an analysis which is both quantitative and qualitative. So that means that we take into account a broad variety of parameters, such as, for example, the number of athletes tested 6 months prior to the event, the number of athletes tested enough 12 months prior to the Olympics, but also qualitative. So qualitative. So we also take into account the distribution of testing in time, the level of testing for athletes who have been medaling at previous editions of the games. And so this work results into recommendations which are issued to anti-doping organizations, which focus really on the quality of testing programs. So we don't simply want to achieve a number of tests. We don't just want to give a number of tests to be implemented, but we want these tests to be implemented at the right time so that the available resources can be used effectively. So these recommendations are generally issued between 7 and 8 months prior to the games, and in parallel, the ITA, on behalf of and in collaboration with Winter Olympic international sports federations and NADOs, we still coordinate day-to-day testing programs to make sure that the right athletes are tested, that then any gaps identified as part of this exercise are covered, especially when it comes to large delegations, right? We really want to make sure that those countries with lots of athletes are testing their athletes properly. Furthermore, but also importantly, the IOC, in accordance to its anti-doping rules, has the possibility to test under its own testing jurisdiction in the 3 months prior to the games, prior to the opening of the village. So this represents a further opportunity to fill any remaining testing gaps. Of course, it's not intended to replace or overlap with the work of anti-doping organizations worldwide. But of course, beyond reflecting the outcomes of the pre-games exercise into games time testing activities, this is a further opportunity that we are offered to fill those gaps and test those athletes identified through this analysis.
Thanks very much, Matteo, for that overview of the pre-games testing program. We'll move now to games time itself and addressing everything that you need to know for during the games. And for that, I'd like to start off with the different rules and documents related to anti-doping that are applicable for Milano Cortina. And for this, I'd like to bring back Damien to help us address this one. First and foremost, Damien, anything that you would like to highlight that is different for athletes and teams heading to these games?
Thank you very much, Mary, and hello again to everyone. I think that in relation to the rules, the key message today is that the Milano Cortina anti-doping rules, including the lists of prohibited substances and methods, are the same rules which apply to all of you throughout the year, be it through your anti-doping rules of your international federation, but also through the rules of your national anti-doping organization. So nowadays, the anti-doping rules are harmonized. They're compliant with the World Anti-Doping Code. And in short, what this means is that the definition of what is an anti-doping rule violation, as well as the prohibited list, are the same during and outside of the games. So there should be no surprises for athletes who are going to Milano Cortina.
Thanks, Damien. You mentioned no surprises there. So clearly, the 11 anti-doping rules apply here as well. So it's probably timely to give a bit of an overview as to what those are as well, please.
Yes, of course, I'm happy to do so. Um, in this regard, I'd also like to remind our audience and everyone joining us today that the ITA produces a lot of educational content, such as this webinar today, and some of it is precisely aimed at explaining the different anti-doping rule violations. And so if you are now, for the first time, discovering the anti-doping rule violations listed on this slide, I would strongly recommend you going to the ITA website, to our YouTube channel, and watching one of our webinars dealing specifically with these 11 possible anti-doping rule violations. But now turning to the list on this slide and very briefly, as I've just mentioned, this is the same exhaustive list of possible violations which you will find in the World Anti-Doping Code and in the anti-doping rules of your international federation. As you can see on this slide, several actions can constitute an anti-doping rule violation, not only the presence of a prohibited substance in a sample that is collected from an athlete, but also other types of behaviors such as refusing to provide a sample, the possession of a prohibited substance or method, or even tampering with the doping control process, and so on. In addition, I think it's also important to mention that certain of these anti-doping rule violations can also be committed by persons who are not athletes, such as coaches, officials, or other individuals who are bound by the anti-doping rules. And so once again, we unfortunately do not have the time during this session to go over each violation in detail. So if anything you see on this slide doesn't seem familiar, please go and watch, for example, our February 2025 monthly webinar on this topic, which you will find on our YouTube channel.
Thanks very much, Damien. I think it's probably worth as well spending a little bit of time there on ADRV 2.4, which is clearly an important responsibility for athletes with their whereabouts. But let's also look at whereabouts during the games, as there are some key points here, not only for athletes, but also for administrators to be aware of too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mary, for this opportunity to comment on whereabouts. It's a topic that remains just as important during the games as during the rest of the year. There's a common misconception amongst athletes who are participating in the games. It's that the whereabouts obligations would somehow not be applicable during the games. It's of course very much understandable because you're reaching the Olympics. It's an incredible milestone. It's a very public achievement as well. And based on our experience, this sometimes leads athletes to forget to keep their whereabouts updated, or to think that they can simply explain that they are at the games and that this would be sufficient to comply with their whereabouts filing obligations. And so, simply put, that is not the case. If you are at the games and in order to allow for no advance notice testing, anti-doping organizations still need to know exactly where you are, when you are arriving at the games, and where you are staying. So to be very clear, for all athletes who are currently included in a registered testing pool or in a testing pool, you are required to provide exactly the same information as you would for any other day or any other competition during the year. Any whereabouts failure for a registered testing pool athlete will be pursued by the relevant international federation or other whereabouts custodian during the games. So this means concretely that you have to include precise information as to where you are, where you're staying, not only, for example, at the Olympic Village in Cortina, but also in which building, your room number, as well as information related to your 60-minute time slot, your regular activities as well, and your competition schedule. A particularity during the games is that this information, for example, your room number, might only become known to you upon your arrival at the village. And so, as during the rest of the year, you need to update your whereabouts filings as soon as you obtain this information. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough, how important whereabouts filings are and remain during the games. The registered testing pool athletes need to file the same level of information as during the rest of the year. Maybe just a little bit of context as to why. It's, of course, very important information for the ITA to conduct efficient testing. This means, of course, locate you, but most importantly, also to conduct testing at a moment which will hopefully not disturb your training and your resting schedule. We are fully aware of the very dense schedule which athletes have during the games, and we try to limit the impact of testing as much as possible. But in order to do so, we need to know what your schedule looks like, and that is done through your whereabouts filings. Now, maybe a last point, very important one as well. In addition to the comments I've just made, it's also important to mention that National Olympic Committees, NOCs, also have the responsibility to file whereabouts information for all of their athletes during the games. That means all athletes, once again, including RTP and TP athletes. And so this is done through an application developed by the ITA, which is called the ITA Rooming application. It's been in use now for several editions of the games, and it is for each National Olympic Committee to make sure that this information is correctly filed. And again, this information is really paramount for us to be able to plan testing around your schedule and to ensure that our testing has as little impact as possible on your day-to-day.
Thanks so much, Damien. We look forward to welcoming you back in a few moments. I'd like to move to the next topic now, and that is something called Therapeutic Use Exemptions, or I'll also refer to it as TUEs for short. Now, as at any other time during the Olympic Games, an athlete has a right to have their health protected. This means that if an athlete has a condition, illness, or injury that requires a medication on the prohibited list, they can apply for a therapeutic use exemption, which gives them permission to use the substance or method within the context of sport without the risk of sanction. Now, existing TUEs, which are in ADAMS, will be automatically recognised. So if this applies to you or an athlete you work with, then there is no need for you to do anything. If a TUE is required during the games, firstly, for security reasons, it is not advised to send the applications by email, nor should the physical files be taken to the ITA office. Instead, what we need people to do are to fill in the TUE application form online, sign it, and have it signed by your physician. Gather all the necessary supporting medical documentation related to the diagnosis. You can refer to checklists for TUE applications and medical information to support the decision of this. Provide the form and the supporting documents using the online form, or submit the form and the supporting documentation directly in ADAMS if you are familiar with this process. We are at the ITA, of course, available for any supports with this. So should you require this support, or if you have any questions, you can book an online appointment. Just a reminder, your TUE must be submitted in legible form using capital letters or typing. And the medical file must include a comprehensive medical history, including documentation from the original diagnosing physicians where possible, the results of all examinations, laboratory investigations, and imaging studies relevant to the application, Any TUE application that is not complete or legible will not be dealt with and will be returned for completion and resubmission. Now, during the Olympic Games, the TUE process time and decisions are usually made in less than 48 hours. Particularly urgent TUEs will be dealt with at greater speed. And to help the ITA TUE committee with this, please make sure all the medical documentation is complete, as this is the most important factor in the turnaround time. Okay, let's move on again now as well and have a look at testing during the games. Now, the testing process is the same no matter where and when an athlete is tested. So, Matteo, are there any nuances that exist during games time or anything else that you would like athletes and their support personnel to be aware of?
Thank you, Mary. Yes, in fact, I think it's important to underline, and you have it written here in this slide, so in accordance to the World Anti-Doping Code, the IOC anti-doping rules, but also in light of the conditions of participation that all athletes have to sign to finalize their registration for the games, athletes can be tested at any time and place. So the reason for this, of course, is that we want to ensure that any test remains unpredictable and can be carried out with no advance notice. And as you can see here, athletes can be tested in competition and out of competition, with the definition of the in-competition period being the period that starts at 11:59 p.m. the day before the competition in which an athlete is scheduled to compete, and this runs until the end of the doping control process associated to that competition. The out of competition period is defined as any other period which is not in competition. The good news is there are no exceptions here. All winter international sports federations follow this same definition of the competition period. You may know that this is not the case when it comes to Summer Olympic Games. There are three IATs specifically which have different definition of the in competition testing period. But here, this is totally harmonized, and so there cannot be any confusion in relation to the interpretation of this specific rule.
Thanks, Matteo. And in terms of who is facilitating the testing on site at the Olympic Games, as of today, we have some figures on the slide there for you to see. So we're looking at 128 doping control officers, 32 doping control station managers, and 45 blood collection officers. And on the side of the chaperones, we are looking at 40 who will be the supervisors and 400 chaperone positions accepted for the upcoming Olympic Games. Now, clearly, all of these people have an important role in the testing experience for an athlete. Athletes will be tested at some of the very best moments of their sports career and also some of the very worst. So, of course, it's important that all of these people are professional. So, Matteo, what type of qualifications, training, or experience do the doping control personnel have who will be at the games?
Thank you, Mary. And in fact, due to the level of competitions at stake here, sample collection personnel operating at the games have to meet certain requirements and the highest standards. So the essential knowledge and experience, which is required from DCOs and which is assessed also in the selection of the sample collection personnel operating at the games, includes being certified and in good standing with a code compliant anti-doping organization, having a minimum of 4 years of experience as a certified doping control officer at the time of the application, having experience in testing and having operated at international events. We require fluent English skills, which is of course essential for all candidates. Of course, any additional languages are welcome and are an asset, but of course, the English is critical for us. They need to be able to use the latest technologies, portable devices, since, as you know, testing is implemented via an ITA software, and so they need to be able to use technologies such as tablets or mobile phones. They need to be familiar with protocols and procedures around doping control activities, especially and specifically for the winter sports. In this case, and most importantly, they must have completed successfully the ITA International Doping Control Officer Training Program, or confirm that they will complete it. They will complete this training prior to the beginning of the games. Of course, we also require a number of interpersonal skills and qualities, which are generally standard in any curriculum vitae of a DCO. So we assess good judgment, the ability of these individuals to work well under pressure, having good attention to detail, being a team player, having strong doping control processing skills, being able to maintain confidentiality at all times, but also having the capability of adapting to an unfamiliar environment, such as operating in a foreign country, having to adapt to the situation that you will find when you will land in Milan. And finally, we also take into account that DCOs must not have had any records of causing critical non-conformities in sample collection sessions. They must not have any criminal conviction and have not committed any anti-doping rule violations in the past 10 years, and had no records of public discrimination or hate speech. This is it. Maybe Mari, I'm looking at questions in the chat. Maybe I can already tackle the one related to the DCOs if I'm not
Please do.
Disrupting the flow. I just read it. There are many questions in relation to whether DCOs appointment for Milano Cortina have already been made. And the answer is yes. So we have selected and contacted DCOs operating in Milano Cortina. I think it's worth mentioning that we have received close to 500 applications. And yeah, we had to select around 130 DCOs operating in Milano Cortina. So in this specific case, we made more people unhappy than happy. But yeah, it is what it is. At the end of the day, we need to all CVs and profiles and applications received are great. There are really people with huge experience in there, but at the end we had to make a selection, and we also had to make sure that there is some legacies, and that not always the same DCOs are operating at the game. So there needs to be also some change moving forward. So I hope I tackled this question and that it didn't disrupt the flow of the presentation, but it was just under my eyes. So this is answered.
No, makes sense. And thank you for that, Matteo. And maybe very briefly, though, a little word on chaperones and the training that they have undergone as well. Now, they are appointed by the organizing committee.
Yeah. So when it comes to to chaperones, it is important to remember that notifying and chaperoning athletes from the point of notification to the doping control station is really critical to ensure the integrity of the doping control process. And typically, this role is fulfilled by volunteers, which are recruited by the local organizing committee. And therefore, training for these people is really important. And so based upon the feedback that the ITA has received from all stakeholders at previous editions of the Games, but more specifically from national Olympic committees and athletes, the ITA has created and launched an e-learning course to further reinforce the training already provided by the organizing committee to chaperones. So again, this role is very important. We really want to make sure that chaperones understand what the roles and responsibilities will be and what they have to expect at the time when the notification takes place. And yeah, this course aims at ensuring that every chaperone fulfill his or her duty in accordance to the World Anti-Doping Code and the IOC anti-doping rules. It will take them about between 2 and 3 hours to go through the course, and it shows all the notification steps, but also puts forward some scenarios that chaperones may need to face during their duties at the games. And yeah, so far the feedback that we received from the various stakeholders have been very positive, and so we are really looking at further improving this e-learning course and yeah, keep implementing it at future edition of the games.
Thanks so much, Matteo. Okay, moving on. We have quite a bit to get through in the next 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to be brief during the next section, but I think it's important that we show you the sample collection kits that are going to be used during the games. First up is the one on screen here. This is for the urine sample collection. Again, a reminder, you will be sent these slides afterwards, so you can have a closer look at the pictures then as well. On the next slide, we have the blood sample collection equipment that will be used as well, including the dried blood spot kit. So let's bring back Damien now as well, and let's look at potential consequences now for anti-doping rule violations during the games. Damien, can you talk us through the next couple of slides, please?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Mary. After discussing sample collection, we'll now address ADRVs, potential ADRVs. And so, simply put, the potential consequences of an anti-doping rule violation are aligned with the WADA code. And so concretely under the Milano Cortina anti-doping rules, the potential consequences are first a provisional suspension. And to be very clear, it is very likely that one will immediately be imposed if an ADRV is committed during the games. The second possible consequence is the exclusion of the person or the athlete from the games. And the third one is the disqualification of results obtained during the games. And for all consequences extending beyond the games, such as, for example, a period of ineligibility, of suspension, once the case is resolved from the IOC's perspective, the case is then referred to your relevant international federation, which will then determine the consequences to be imposed under the anti-doping rules of your federation. And so during the games, what matters and the first focus of the disciplinary proceedings is what concerns the games, and so the participation in the games and the results.
Thanks, Damien. Let's move straight on as well to the steps, please.
Yes, so the results management steps during the games. First thing to note is that if a potential anti-doping rule violation is committed during the games, the proceedings are fast-paced. This is because the concerned athletes are often shortly scheduled to compete, and so a determination must quickly be made as to whether they can participate in the games or not. And so the procedure is described in detail in the IOC Milano Cortina anti-doping rules and in the WADA International Standard for Results Management. but we've summarized at a high level the main steps of the procedure on this slide. And so the first step is the initial review, which will be very different and will depend on the type of anti-doping rule violation that is reported. For example, if we are dealing with an analytical violation, so if we receive a report from the Rome laboratory that a prohibited substance was found in a collected sample, we will conduct the initial review of the result, for example, to determine whether the athlete possesses a TUE for the substance or not. Now, if we are dealing with a non-analytical violation, for example, if a doping control officer reports to us that an athlete refused to provide a sample, we will proceed with the necessary investigative steps. For example, interviewing the DCO, the chaperone, together with our colleagues from our intelligence and investigation department. Now, as I've just mentioned, during the games, this happens quite quickly with the aim of notifying the athlete as soon as possible. And so that segues to the second stage, the notification stage. And so in an unfortunate event that an athlete is suspected of having committed an anti-doping rule violation during the games, the athlete and the NOC chef de mission are very quickly informed by email and by phone, and they receive a formal notification from the ITA, which will provide a description of the alleged anti-doping rule violation. For example, informing the athlete that he or she has tested positive further to the analysis of a sample collected on so and so date during such and such competition. And this notification will also set out the applicable consequences, including if a provisional suspension is imposed, and will also contain all the detailed information as to all of the athlete's procedural rights. And so in addition to the athlete, as I just said, the NOC chef de mission, WADA, and the NADO are also informed of this potential anti-doping rule violation. And so even if the procedural schedule, as I mentioned, is quite compact, the person will be informed of all of his or her rights, and the process will not be rushed. For example, the athlete has the right to challenge the provisional suspension, has the right to have the B sample analyzed, and so this will take place very quickly at the Rome laboratory if an athlete decides to proceed with the analysis of their B sample. And if the athlete, as I just mentioned, challenges the provisional suspension or the anti-doping rule violation, there will be a hearing before the Court of Arbitration for Sports Anti-Doping Division, which has an ad hoc presence on site in Milan. And CAS ADD has very seasoned arbitrators who are on site, ready to conduct hearings, to hear an athlete on the reasons why he or she believes that they should be allowed to participate in the games. And this process will usually take place within 24 to 48 hours, depending on the athlete's competition schedule. And all of the logistical information in relation to the hearing will be set out in the notification. And lastly, but very importantly, there will be a pro bono lawyer service, which will be available to athletes, with lawyers available to assist them on short notice and without costs. And so, as I also already mentioned, after the case is resolved from an IOC, from a games standpoint, the case is referred to the respective international federation for further consequences, again, the application of the appropriate period of ineligibility, for example. And maybe the most important message to today is that although the ITA is, of course, acting as the entity bringing forward the case against the athlete or the athlete support personnel, we're also here to provide information in relation to this disciplinary process. And so we're always here to answer any question you may have in relation to the process, in relation to your rights and obligations and options of any person subject to anti-doping disciplinary proceedings.
Thanks, Damien. And then maybe also very briefly in a quick overview, could you maybe represent our colleagues in intelligence and investigations here and just spend a moment or so explaining to people how they can report any suspicious behavior?
Absolutely. So we have our ITA Reveal platform, as you see on screen just now. It's available every day of the year, including during the Olympic Games, for anyone that has a piece of information or a suspicion regarding any doping matter. So you're able to go to the platform and to report the information completely anonymously and in a secure manner. For example, if you see a suspicious behavior, if you see an athlete having doping substances in their luggage, any small piece of information can be reported. We really encourage everyone to make use of this platform. We don't have eyes and ears everywhere. Whistleblowing information is very valuable to us, especially during major events such as the games. It allows us to immediately react, conduct follow-up, target testing, investigate, and follow up on this information. So even if you think the information might be very small or just a suspicion, it might be the missing piece of the puzzle for us. It might be linked to an investigation we've already initiated, or just in general may corroborate other information we've received. So in short, please do come forward. These efforts and this information really contributes to fostering clean sports.
Thanks so much, Damien. I'd like to bring Matteo back in now as well to have a brief look at the post-games period as well, because the anti-doping work doesn't stop at the end of the games, does it, Matteo? Perhaps
We
you
never
can.
stop.
We know you don't, but perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what
Yes.
happens here.
Yeah, maybe just a short overview related to the long-term sample storage. As you know, in occasion of the Olympic Games, any samples collected under the IOC's jurisdiction prior to or during the games is stored for a period of up to 10 years. So these samples may be reanalyzed in the next 10 years when new analytical methods will be available, will have been developed by the WADA accredited laboratories. And here we really take advantage of the progress in analytical and investigation techniques, and the goal is to kill the idea that the cheaters are a step ahead, and that sooner or later they can be caught. All samples will be repatriated and stored in a secured, centralized long-term storage location facilities, which is managed by the ITA and is located here in Switzerland. And the long-term storage program today represents an extremely powerful tool, as you may be aware from anti-doping use from past games. A number of athletes cheating have been caught via this tool, so it's also very effective in terms of the deterrent in anti-doping.
Thank you, Matteo. We're going to stick with you as well. We're now going to move on to a couple of slides to address some of the questions that we received when you all registered for this webinar. Now, Matteo, we've put most of the questions up there. We've grouped them where necessarily as well. Some of them we've already tackled during the course of the past 60 minutes. So maybe you could just go through the questions that we haven't addressed and provide your answers, please.
Okay, so where the collected samples will be analyzed. So all samples will be analyzed in the WADA accredited laboratory located in Rome. For your information, the Rome laboratory has recently moved into a brand new facility, which is equipped with a state-of-the-art devices and systems. And so this will ensure access to the very latest technologies in terms of analytical methods and ability of the laboratory to detect prohibited substances. Is there already a list of selected tests, or will it be based on the discipline? I think this goes back to the risk assessment and test distribution plan framework, which I provided at the very beginning of this webinar. And so again, we take into account a number of parameters to put together to develop this risk assessment and the test distribution plan. We take into account the testing history, pre-games gap analysis, athlete biological passport data, laboratory analytical data, intelligence information received via various channels and sources. And again, this remains a dynamic plan which can change, will most likely change during the period of the games based upon the input received via all the stakeholders involved in this process. What do we have then? Why does the ISU not conduct anti-doping control for all athletes in World Championships qualification races for the Winter Olympic Games. I mean, the risk assessment and the test distribution plan is mandated by the World Anti-Doping Code, and it's not only mandatory for major events organizations, but also for international sports federations. So IFs go through the exact same work and tasks. They also need to have a risk assessment, a test distribution plan to make sure that the available resources, and here I'm specifically also mentioning financial resources, are focused on where the gaps are. So they have to make sure, we have to make sure that those gaps are fulfilled, and that's where we believe the risks are. What can athletes and their teams do to stay comfortable during long waits in the doping control station, especially after competition? So when athletes arrive in the doping control station, they may be lucky and get into a processing room right away, or if someone is before them, they may have to wait. However, this waiting time can be used to already start filling out and completing all information that are necessary to then go through the doping control process. So completing personal data notification, personal information, notification information, the list of medications. If you require a representative or an interpreter, you can use that time to make sure that those individuals, those people, support personnel are located and they can reach you. So this is not wasted time, of course. It can shorten then the doping control process. And of course, on top of that, you have a lot of education information which are available in the doping control station that can be consulted. If you have any questions regarding the process, everything can be explained to athletes during that waiting time in the doping control station. I think we already tackled the chaperones, questions, and volunteers. Which supplier is providing the drug testing equipment? This has also been answered during the presentation. And with regards to what is the main advantage of the program? So the main advantage is, of course, to implement an independent, transparent, and risk-based and intelligence-driven anti-doping program. And this preserves the integrity and the reputation of the Olympic Games, the fair play, the athletes' rights. A robust anti-doping program ensures that the performances of the athletes are authentic, right? And that medals are based on talent and the athlete's hard work rather than on the use of prohibited substances. But finally, I mean, it also has the benefit of safeguarding the athlete's health by protecting their health and well-being against the use of prohibited substances that can harm your body.
Thanks so much, Matteo. It might be good if we can try and do a couple of the live questions. So maybe I'll ask you to have a look at that while Damien also tackles the questions that were submitted in advance that are addressed to him. And same message to you, Damien. Some of them we've already covered during the webinar.
Indeed, and some are quite similar, so I'll try to tackle them, most of them in one go in view of the time. They mostly relate to the whereabouts requirements submissions for athletes who are not part of a registered testing pool or a testing pool. And so for these athletes, as we've discussed today, the obligation to provide whereabouts information falls upon the respective NOC. This is done again through an ITA application, the ITA Rooming app, and it's for the NOC to ensure that this information is correctly filed. All NOCs should already have received a first communication on this topic from the ITA. If you haven't, please get in touch with us, for example, using the support@ita.sport email address. And by the 15th of December, so just in a few days' time, all users will receive invitation to connect to the application. And on top of that, two online training webinars will be offered early January and on the 8th and the 12th of January for this application. So again, if you should already have received a preliminary communication, and if that's not the case, please do get in touch with us. And in relation to who and when this information is required, so the whereabouts information needs to be submitted by the NOCs for all athletes at the games and during the games period, which ranges from the opening of the village, and so that's on the 30th of January 2026, and the closing ceremony of the games on the 22nd of February 2026. I think that tackles everything, Mary. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Damien. Next slide we're going to show is the resources. I won't spend long on this one because, again, you will get the slides shortly after the webinar ends. I see that we've had quite a lot of live questions come through as well. We're almost out of time, but I think it's important just to spend a couple of minutes, at the very least, acknowledging some of the topics that have come through here. So I have a team on the back end here who are answering some of those with a short written text, particularly those related to Adele and any difficulties getting onto the platform there. Equally, thank you for your suggestions about maybe having additional webinars and opportunities for different groups. Damien's already mentioned one there for administrators and dealing with the rooming and whereabouts. So some of the other questions, I believe as well, have been addressed, particularly in the last few minutes. But Damien, maybe could I come to you, maybe for Andre's question, which is the first one in the chat there, about doping being a criminal offence in Italy. Do you have any quick overview on this one?
Yes, very quickly, and I'll preface this by saying that I am not an Italian trained lawyer, so my comments on Italian criminal law need to be taken with a grain of salt. But yes, indeed, intentional performance enhancing doping is a criminal offense in Italy. And in general, when it comes to criminal law, and it's the same with control, with laws concerning controlled substances or even with traffic violations, all athletes, visitors at the game are subject to Italian criminal law. That's the case if you go on holidays to Italy or if you go to the games. So that's that. In short, the answer is yes. But again, it's not all doping. It's intentional performance enhancing doping in certain circumstances.
Thank you so much. We are going to have to wrap things up for this particular live session now as we are out of time. I'm taking a quick look at the Q&A here. I see some questions also related to training, also the rooming app, whereabouts questions as well. If we haven't addressed your question very specifically, if it's not been covered in what we've already talked about, we will pop our email address up on screen. So I would encourage you to get in touch with us for any additional questions. They can all come to us in the education team. We will happily liaise with colleagues for any questions that need to go to them as subject matter expertise. That really leaves me just with a few more seconds to say thank you so much for joining us in this webinar. We had several hundred of you with us, and thank you as well to Damien and Matteo for their expertise and their interventions in this webinar. Hope you have a great rest of the day and all the very best with the final weeks of planning ahead of this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.